broadcasting live from the Roanoke Valley of southwestern Virginia. Join us and see what life looks like from a medium's perspective with Reverend Tracey Lockwood, the medium's medium. We'll explore the tools of psychic development, hear stories and experiences from the other side, and learn to listen to our natural intuition. Now, our host, Reverend Tracey Lockwood.
Hello, beautiful lights, and welcome to another episode of From a Medium's Perspective. Before we get going on today's show, I just wanted to remind you that I offer a professional psychic mediumship certification program. If you are a beginner, don't be put off. It could be for you because it's a very intensive immersion program that exposes you to pretty much every facet of psychic mediumship, working through the body tools, the left brain tools, the psychic tools into tools for mediumship, and then letting go of the tools completely and moving further into mediumship and into channeling, all in 12 weeks, all in the comfort of your own home, all by live training on Zoom. I offer 2.5 hours each week of training that we do lots and lots of exercises. You'd get 30 hours of practical classroom time in, and you would also have 20 hours outside classroom practice time, plus some other goodies that go along. If it seems like that might be of interest to you, please check it out on my website at mediumtracylockwood.com. Well, today I have such a unique and interesting guest because of her irreverent humor and her skill as an astrologer. She is a writer, intuitive. She bills herself as an empathic astrologer. She has a BA in psychology, former background as a corporate officer for private investment companies, and now she puts all of her focus on astrological chart mapping and through channeling messages from higher energies. Her name is Susan Grace. Welcome to the show, Susan.
Thank you, Tracey. I'm so excited to be here with you today. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure here. For those of you that are curious, if you want to check her out online and spy on her while we're here on air, her website is susangrace.org, not com. So susangrace.org. We were bandying about different ideas for the show, and she suggested that we maybe focus on eclipses. But before we got into that, tell us a little bit about why you use the term empathic astrologer. I like that term, but I wondered what your thoughts were on that.
I use empathic astrologer, number one, because there are a lot of astrologers in different modalities that get very technical in understanding the charts in a very nuts and bolts scientific kind of way. And
Yes.
For me, I use the chart as a tool to feel out what's happening with a person. So I go into a chart the same way every time, and it gives my guides and their guides and the energy surrounding us kind of the clue that we're getting started. And then I'm able to pick up on how they're feeling, what their chart feels like to them, and the intent of the energies for their life. I think that some astrologers can use the chart to kind of figure out where people are challenged or have a difficult time, and I try to feel what the energies are trying to show the person as far as the highest intent of the energy. What is it ultimately taking you toward? Because the charts never set us up to fail, and that everything in the chart is specific to you and your soul's growth. So I try to get in there with clients and figure out what does that feel like? What does it look like in your life, and how to navigate those energies? And it happened, I didn't try for that to happen. Just whenever I started reading for people professionally, a channel opened up, and I didn't expect it. I didn't even ask for it. I just suddenly started receiving messages for people, and it took me off guard just as much as it did anybody else. And so sometimes I still look up and say, am I an astrologer? How did this happen?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Tell us a little bit about the collective.
By the collective, I mean the collective of humanity, and also just the collective of the greater force of life. So there's an experience of being alive on planet Earth for humans, where we have, for about 2,000 years, been in darkness, in where our solar system's orbit has been traveling from our sister star Sirius. And at December 21st, 2012, our solar system came out of that darkest part of our cycle, broke through the galactic plane, and is now in a trajectory headed towards the end of our suffering, where we are being liberated from being in a perpetual cycle of repeating our original wounding over and over and over and over again, trying to undo the wounding. That's what the ego does, is it replays it and it hangs on to our hurt, thinking that if it does something different, then it can unhurt us, which is impossible. We can't undo the original wounding. It happened, and now we get to heal from it and move on with the evolution of our soul and with our lives.
How do you get that from astrology?
The turning point was at 2112, and if you look at the chart for that time of the galactic shift, it showed that we are opening up to a new way of seeing our lives with coming out of our suffering and moving into liberation and being able to be present in our lives. One is Chiron and Neptune in Pisces has been saying specifically, we all get to come out of our suffering, and we are supported from very high energies to do that. We have, for the last 30, 40 years, been going through a lot of very serious, intense transits through Scorpio that has us we've been wrestling with our suffering for a long time. Those transits have ended. They ended whenever Saturn came out of Scorpio 2.5 years ago. We had one more round of Mars going retrograde into Scorpio that polished it off, but we're done with that. That's over. Pluto in Capricorn is about halfway through the sign right now. It has been taking apart an old paradigm of suppression and fear and separateness, and it's bringing in a new paradigm of, through our union together collectively, through sacred union, we have a common purpose to free ourselves. That's happening now. Saturn going into Capricorn in December will push forward the dismantling of that old paradigm and the rise of the new one. Next April is Chiron goes into Aries, so we will be healing our inner warrior and our collective warrior to where we no longer destroy each other.
Let me catch you just a second. For those people that are not as familiar with astrology, Chiron, I understand, is an asteroid that's the wounded healer.
It's an asteroid. It's an asteroid called I think it's designated as a dwarf planet. But Chiron is the wounded healer. A lot of people refer to it as the unhealable wound, and I say that is impossible. There's no such thing as that unhealable wound. That we get to heal and come out of the cycle of thinking that we're the walking wounded in perpetuity, and we get to become the rising up out of our woundedness and become the walking healed. So in a chart, it will mark for the collective where we're trying to heal ourselves, and an individual chart that will show where your ancient wounding has been and where you're trying to come out of your own suffering.
I really like that term, the walking healed. You know, we get all this zombie stuff with The Walking Dead and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It's nice to hear that term, the walking healed. So when you were saying in 2012, when this shift happened energetically, Chiron and Neptune were in Pluto. So the wounded healer and Neptune, I think of Neptune as like dreams and delusions and stuff like that. What would you say about Neptune for people?
Yeah, that's not how I would read it. It's Chiron and Neptune in Pisces. Neptune rules Pisces. Neptune marks where we are connected to God universe. So Neptune in its own sign means that right now everyone is very connected to God universe, and we are very highly supported in healing however we've been hurting ourselves or each other. So you're going to see a really massive shift happen in the next, well, it's going to go on for, I think we're looking at more like 12 years, but I think we would expect about 5 or 6 years. But Neptune in Pisces is going to keep reminding us that God is still present. God is still
that's
present.
Lovely. I like that. That. I know Pisceans have sort of everything. Do you know what I mean? In terms of sensitivity and can sometimes be too reflective for their own good, but yes. So when you said Chiron and Neptune in Pisces, encapsulate what that means again, and then we'll move on.
It means that we're coming out of the age of Pisces where there was a lot of self-sacrifice going on for all of us. It's an age that lasted about 2,000 years, where it was a lot of self-sacrifice, a lot of trying to pray our way into salvation. That's where religions have taken on a lot of the guidance and control over how we heal ourselves. Chiron and Neptune and Pisces is saying, listen, you're not meant to stay in the suffering. You are not fatally flawed. You are not here to sacrifice yourself into regaining your holiness. That holiness would never require your suffering. Come out of your suffering, come back into the presence of your life. And as like I've been saying, that presence is the new prayer, that God is present in the moment.
Oh, that's really interesting, which brings us to April, Chiron moving into Aries. Yes?
2018, and then the next month Uranus will go into Taurus. So that's going to shift. That's going to be another big shift. We have about four major shifts in the next, between fall and spring, that are going to just keep pushing us further and further and further into the new paradigm. Chiron and Aries will be us evaluating how we are self-destructive and destructive to each other in our own sense of power. That power is not meant to be, power and ego is not meant to be the leader. That the heart is meant to lead. And our power is supposed to be used to support whatever we feel in our heart and whatever we feel in a visionary way we want for each other and for the planet. And so we're going to be closing off that wound. And then Uranus and Taurus is going to have us for a good amount of time. It's going to be having us look at what do we actually value and what do we find worthy, that we've been subjected to a lot of messages about consumerism and consumption and lavishness and kind of pillaging the earth for all of its resources. And now I think Uranus and Taurus is going to say that we need to reevaluate that's not actually valuable for us or the planet.
Oh, yeah. So it sounds like we're going in a very gross sense, in a planetary sense, a collective sense, from an external spirituality to a more internal, like instead of the divide between us and God being seen as a gap that has to be overcome or suffered for, looking at answers coming from an external base, more to an internal spirituality where there is no division and we are all one. Would you say?
Yeah, I think that oneness is coming back into our awareness. It is the re-entry of the divine feminine. So the divine feminine and divine masculine come back into balance. So we become one within ourselves again. We become whole again. And in our wholeness, in our sovereignty, then we're able to come back together in wholeness and oneness with each other. So it's through our internal balance and sovereignty that we're able to meet each other again.
That's really beautiful. We were going to talk about the eclipses a little bit. First of all, are you talking lunar or solar eclipses? And tell us a little bit about eclipses in general.
Mm-hmm. The eclipses are called the bringers of change. And so they happen every February, March, and every August, September. roughly. They usually come in twos. Sometimes they come in threes. They're called the bringers of change because they really do bring change that you didn't see coming. And it's a change that you need that supports your evolution. And every time we go into an eclipse season, I think, I've got this one figured out. And then they happen, and then I'm like, I did not have that figured out at all.
I did not see that one. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know people are probably laughing because you're so intuitive and an astrologer. And I'm a psychic medium, and, we should know these things, but hey,
Yeah.
to ride along on the planet just like everybody else. So.
So it's that way by design. It brings in change that you if you had already known that you needed to make this change, you would have already done it. So it intentionally brings something that you're not aware of. But the way that it works is the first eclipse, the lunar eclipse will open the window of the eclipse season. The solar eclipse will close the window. And in between, we're kind of set adrift into a pocket of energy that we're not sure what to do with it. And we're not supposed to know what to do with it for a while. It takes us 6 months until the next eclipse season to integrate that energy. So the lunar eclipse it happens in an area where we suddenly feel different about something, and therefore it makes us feel really unsure and insecure. And then the solar eclipse, I describe it as having a defibrillator on your self-identity. It's a sudden jolt to who you know yourself to be, and you end up feeling more confident and more in your stride, and like, oh wow, I'm a new person. And then you can go on from there and figure out how to integrate the fullness of those energies for the next 6 months. And one season leads into the next.
But it's not back and forth. It's not like we're losing ground with these epiphanies or connections that are happening. We're actually deepening. It's more like an upward spiral. The spiral goes back around to self-reflection, but then it goes on out to expression.
The lessons of the eclipses build and build and build and build. They keep feeding one into the next. And sometimes, there's larger cycles of eclipses too, which my other astrologer colleagues would have more to say on that than I do. The ones who completely nerd out with the astrology.
Well, just to ask you again, so you said February and March. So when you say that, is the lunar in February and the solar in March, and the lunar in August and the solar in September, or are they? How are they?
They're usually around February or March and around August or September. Like, I think of them as spring and fall, but other people have different seasons in different parts of the world. So it's those months of the year.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and then the eclipses are 2 weeks apart. So there's the lunar eclipse, and 2 weeks later you have a solar eclipse.
So there's been a little hubbub about the eclipses in 2017. It feels like maybe not that they haven't been focused on for eons, as the astrologers of courts and medieval times, etc., were aware of, but it just feels a little bit more intense to me. And I see, maybe because we're on social media, I don't know, but what do you think is going on with the eclipses this year in 2017?
These are important eclipses. The way that they are aspecting right now in the middle of other cycles is looking like we are being asked to become super lit up with inspiration and confidence and our purpose and our calling right before the astrology shifts into there being a noticeable external shifts in the society that we live in. You will see a collapse of the old paradigm. You will also see the rise of a new one. And to fuel that, the energies are trying to get us in line with the meaning of our life. Why are we here? Why are we doing this? What matters to us? What makes us happy? The solar eclipse that's coming, it's called the Great American Eclipse because it's going from coast to coast in the U.S. and it's a total solar eclipse. It'll be at the North Node in Leo. It will be in most everyone's natal Regulus in Leo. It will be conjuncting the Regulus that is now shifted into Virgo, which says that we are no longer led by kings. We are led by the energy of the goddess. trining into the galactic center in Sagittarius and Uranus in Aries. So it's a big one.
You said something about the galactic center in Sagittarius. Is that what you said?
Uh-huh.
Being a Sagittarius, I'm kind of curious about what is that?
The galactic center is known as the eye of God. It's where we receive the vision of how God is expressing itself through us as humans.
So as the eclipse happens in there, is it bringing...
The eclipse is in Leo, but it's going to trine into the galactic center in Sagittarius. We're all being called forward into the meaning of our lives. What is our purpose? What do we truly believe in? Where can we keep hope alive no matter what? Can we, or of course we can, we're being shown that we can say, we will live in joy and we will follow our hearts and you cannot make us afraid.
I think that applies to people at any age because we have chapters in our lives. So our purpose as it unfolds is based on what we want to do with our lives and what resonates with us in our lives. But it can change and shift and develop over the course of a lifetime. So people that are very young getting in touch with their purpose and the meaning of their life, and then those that are a little bit older and on. Is it influencing a particular generation? Is it a 30-something impact, or is it a global impact, or is it Western impact?
It's global. People who are between 35 and 45 right now are in their midlife transit, so they are really coming.
If you missed the first half of the show or you would like to listen to past episodes, you can find them on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com and put in Medium Tracey Lockwood, and you'll find a lot of hardcore mediumship training and also conversations with some amazingly illuminated people. So check it out on YouTube, and please subscribe when you're there. Well, Susan, welcome back.
Thank you, Tracy.
We were talking just before the show about the effect of eclipses, how there's kind of a collapse of the old paradigm, meaning the way that people view how we have to behave or act in the world, and the rise of a new one that is more self-empowering, more kind, more filled with light, hopeful. And you were talking about the Great American Eclipse with the North Node in Leo. And we were talking a little bit about the galactic center in Sagittarius. And we had just gotten on talking about the influence of this huge eclipse that's been touted as the Great American Eclipse just because of, as you mentioned, where it occurs. Tell us a little bit more.
Affecting the globe, but generationally, people between about 35 to 45 who are in their midlife transits right now have their Pluto in Libra that's squaring the Pluto in Capricorn that's lighting up the change in paradigm. So they're feeling it. They're feeling a lot of where am I needed? How can I participate? Pluto and Scorpio generation people haven't been called up quite yet, although they're feeling it. They feel like they have something to say, and some of them are starting early, and they're starting powerfully so, that Pluto and Scorpio generation people will be the ones to say, look, this is wrong, this is right, here's where the line is, here's what we need to change.
25 to 35, is that, yeah?
Right, 25 to 35. I'm interested in, I'm going to be watching the people who were born with Pluto and Virgo, so they're more around 45 to 55. They're the people who, and Tracy, I think you're part of this generation. I was looking at your chart, and you do have Pluto and Virgo.
Oh,
so
okay.
Your generation, or Pluto and Virgo generation, were the people who were coming out of the 50s when there was a lot of pretense of everything's perfect, everything's fine, and then Pluto hit Virgo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then Pluto hit Virgo and said, actually, that's not true. There's a lot going on that you people aren't looking at, and so it ripped up the carpet on the reality of what was happening, and that's where we got the civil rights. That's where a lot of war came out of it. That's where epidemics started being recognized. There was a lot of social movement from Pluto saying you must look at the reality of the life that you live in. now I think that Pluto and Virgo people who you've seen cycles of let's try and it didn't work. Now I think you're going to start to see it pay off. And everyone needs to turn to a Pluto and Virgo generation person and say thank you, because we wouldn't be here. We need to hear from you. You need to be speaking about what it takes to have a massive, massive shift in consciousness on the planet, because
we have
we
survived.
could easily. Mm-hmm. But I mean, we need to younger generations who have their Pluto in a different sign. Okay. They need to be shown that, listen, if you want massive change, you're going to have to be committed and not give up. Because a lot of people will be like, oh, it's not worth it. We're all going down. We're not going down. It just takes a lot. It takes a lot, you know?
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, you know?
Right.
But it does let you know that you can survive and that things do ultimately change too.
And that effort really does pay off.
Yeah.
The first eclipse just happened yesterday, and so we're going to be in that lunar eclipse energy for a couple of weeks, and you should expect for things to still be shifting, that we don't get the effect of the eclipse the second it happens, that it'll continue to unfold for 2 weeks. And so anything that feels like it's making you uncomfortable, or it is changing things in ways you did not expect, or suddenly you don't know where you belong because it's an Aquarius, then just write it out. Don't make any drastic moves unless the energy is saying you have to do this right now, and you'll know. Like if you get fired, you have to leave the building.
Right.
But you need just trust that the lunar eclipse is bringing you something that you need to go with. Participate in it. Trust that it's taking you to where you need to be, and let the full cycle play out. The second eclipse on the 21st is the really big one. That's the one that's the empowering one. And we're in that eclipse energy for 2 weeks past that too, until we get the next full moon. So I think that's September 6th, I think. So this is a process where everyone's going to feel like the energy feels super wonkadonk. You can't tell what's happening. Nobody can see what's coming next. And you just have to trust that you're in the hands of something bigger than you that knows exactly what it's doing. I read for the collective every day on social media, on Facebook and on Instagram, where I give my reading of what the energy is for everyone that day. And a lot of people feel like I'm talking directly to them. And my answer is that I am talking directly to you. That every individual makes up the collective. The collective is not something out there and you're something different, and we're all under the same sky.
If people wanted to follow that, what website should they go to? I know you do it on Facebook. What page do you do that on Facebook?
It's facebook.com, and it's under Double Scorp, DOUBL, Scorp, SCORP.
Oh, Double Scorp. For double
Scorpio.
Okay.
Because I'm a double Scorpio, yeah. Yeah, and I'm under Susan Grace for Instagram.
And that would be through your website, susangrace.org, and then click on So you also channel. I'm a channel. You're a channel. Tell me a little bit about your channeling messages from higher energies. How did that start?
I didn't intend to be a channel. Whenever I first started reading for people, I had other energies that would show up in the reading. And at first I wasn't going to say anything to the client. I was just like, oh, there's somebody else in the room. And, and so I just decided that I used to qualify. I used to say, I know this sounds crazy, but here's what I feel like is around us. And the first one was I described someone's father who was in a t-shirt and jeans, and he had a hammer in his hand, and he was like tapping it into his other hand like he was angry. And he was pushing on me, and I was like, do you want to back up a little bit? God.
Right.
And so I described it to her, and she said, oh, that's my father. He used to build fences. And I was like, I do not think he likes this guy that we're talking about at all. And she's like, okay, good. That's what I needed to know. I'm like, yep, okay, well, your dad doesn't like him.
Right.
And
So he wasn't being angry or low vibrational. He was just upset at
he was conveying an energy.
Yes.
Yeah. He was conveying an energy of, no, not this guy. I don't like him.
No.
That shows up in readings a lot, where I can feel a conveyance of energy for people. And then I started getting different other kinds of hits in about 2012, where I started hearing voices, and I started to see orbs. I started to see flashes of light. At one point, there was one night whenever I went to bed, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I heard one long note from an orchestra, as if it was in my room. And there's clearly not an orchestra in my room. And so I went back to bed, and then I woke up again, and I heard the roar of a crowd, like in a stadium, as if it was outside my window, and there's no stadium near here. I went back to bed, woke up again. It sounded like a bunch of people running on the other side of the wall from me, and there's nobody in that apartment.
I gave you the coordinates to my chart. What were your first pops out of that? What do you see in there?
The first pop that I get is that anciently you have seen what humanity can do to itself, and you're trying to reconcile that. That you've seen it, and it has hurt you, and you know of a different way. And so you're here to say there's a different way. We don't have to live this way anymore. And so it's trying to repair the hurt that you felt about what humans can do to themselves. And then all of your chart is in the upper hemisphere, that you're really here to serve a higher calling, a higher cause.
What does that mean when it's in the upper? I know like the chart has like a clock face, and that there are 12 segments, and they're called houses, and there's a horizon that divides the chart in half. But when you say that about the upper hemisphere, what does that indicate in a chart? It's where your life is pointed up into higher meaning. So 1 through 6 is how you self-identify, your self-worth, how your mind works, how you feel safe in the world, inner child, presence. And then once you go above the horizon line, then it's going into you and other people, trust and intimacy and boundaries, and then you get into meaning, purpose, and your place in the world and finding your tribe. So it's more into the collective kind of work for you than internal understanding who you are. Okay. Oh, interesting.
So you're in the right line of work, Tracy.
Thank you.
Good job. Good job.
Yay. Good deal. Good deal. I know people have said, oh, I can see in your chart that you're a spiritual teacher, or your mediumship is right down your alley, and I'm like, what are they looking at? Do you know what they're looking at?
I think that they're looking at your Scorpio placements, because you've got Mars, Mercury retrograde, and Scorpio at very high degrees, meaning they're master level. And Scorpio is one of the 3 water signs where it gives you an ability to see the truth, even when other people can't see it. Neptune is in Scorpio too, at an earlier degree at 7, but that's having your connection to God, universe, very intense and present everywhere, that you see divinity even in darkness, where other people need to have only bright lights and rainbows to feel God present. You feel God present everywhere, no matter what. And you have a knowing, a solid knowing that all darkness can be turned into light. I do intensives, which is where you spend 4 weeks with me, where we look at very deeply into your natal chart, your progress chart, your solar return, the chart for your soul. It's 4 weeks of we meet 90 minutes a week for 4 weeks, where we go really deep into who you are and into how you can heal and evolve your life. And so the intensives right now are 30% off until the next equinox. You can find that on the services page of my website.
Thank you so much, Susan. We're at the end of an hour. Unbelievable. Thank you so much. For our listeners, please remember it's never inappropriate to be kind, and without integrity, you have nothing. See you next week.